Play ball.
How you doing, baseball fans? Welcome to another edition of the Brushback with JP Ricciardi. I'm John Arezzi. Another week here at the Brushback, and the baseball season heads into All-Star Game week coming up. So lots to talk about today. With the star of the show, let's say hello to the baseball lifer, the man who spent over 40 years in the game, our perennial All-Star, JP. JP, how you doing?
Hey, John. I appreciate that introduction. I'm doing great. I can't believe that we are currently, heading into the All-Star break. It's always an exciting time because the races are shaping up, and the next 3 weeks you're going to see what organizations are serious about winning.
That is very true. It's going to be exciting to watch. We have a great show today, JP. I know you're bringing on a real special, not just a special guest, but a really good friend of yours.
Great guy, Hall of Famer, Tim Kurkjain. I don't know anybody who loves the game more than Tim. For me, if anybody has ever watched the Ted Lasso, he's the Ted Lasso of baseball. Everybody loves Tim Kurkjain.
Yes.
So I'm very excited to have him on. I love talking to him. He always fires me up. And, I love all the guests that we have, and I appreciate all their time. Some you just get really fired up for, and Tim is one of those guys.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it as well. Let's get right into this week's Hot Takes, brought to you by Percy's Appliance Outlet, featuring brand name appliances at up to 80% off regular retail prices. They're Worcester's largest dealer of home appliances and electronics, serving Worcester for 80 years. Check out all of this week's specials by going to percys.com or give them a call, 508-438-6800. Okay, JP, as we head into the All-Star break, the annual Midsummer Classic between the American and National Leagues, this evolved over the years, changed so much. It's more than that game now, from the kickoff of the MLB draft to the Futures game, all of the Home Run Derby, the Fan Fest, all the other activities. It's really a 4-day event now. Give us your take on the All-Star game, the changes over the years, and your general feeling as an insider to what it's become.
Well, I actually like what it's become because it showcases our game. And, our game is in the spotlight. There's nothing else really going on. I think it's prior to the Olympics starting. So that takes a little bit of, the Olympics don't put any pressure on Major League Baseball. But I like what they've done. Back in the day when I was a kid, the All-Star game was so big because you never saw, where I live in Massachusetts, you never saw the National League. So to see Hank Aaron and Willie Mays and Willie McCovey, that was a big, big thing for us. Now you see so much of the players that kind of novelty is gone. But what they've done is they've introduced the home run hitting contest, which I think is great. It generates so much excitement. You've got the Futures game, which highlights our current rising stars. It's the Fan Fest all around the game. It's really 4 days of embracing our game, and I think they've done a very good job with it, and I like it.
Yeah, the marketing is certainly there, and it is a great event. I've been to a few of them, and I love the 4-day experience. You mentioned the Home Run Derby, and that's what I want to touch upon next. This year, as always, features 8 contestants. Two-time winner, the Mets' Pete Alonso, is back in. Los Angeles Dodgers former Blue Jay Teoscar Hernandez will compete for the first time. He joins the young stud from the Baltimore Orioles, Gunnar Henderson, Kansas City's Bobby Witt Jr., Atlanta's Marcell Ozuna, Philly's Alec Bohm, Cleveland's Jose Ramirez, and the host team has a participant, Texas Rangers' Adolis Garcia. JP, I do want to ask you something. This doesn't have the star power it traditionally has had. And there's an article that came out actually earlier today by Ken Rosenthal, which I read, and I found it fascinating because I was kind of thinking the same thing myself. Not taking anything away from Pete Alonso. But Pete Alonso, hasn't had a stellar year, but he has star power. He's won the Derby twice. And I think the game of baseball maybe needed that premier guy to kind of be in the Derby this year. What's your take on what Ken said is that Major League Baseball selected him to the All-Star game because they needed star power in that home run derby, and Pete wasn't going to participate unless he was selected to the team. So
okay, so let's stop there.
Yeah.
So what? I mean, what's the big deal? I mean, if you got guys like Soto or Otani, Trout, and they can't play, what's wrong with bringing back the defending champ or a former champ? That I know he's not having the All-Star year, but people are excited to see Pete Alonso. Who's embraced the home run hitting contest more than Pete Alonso? So isn't that something we want?
Yeah.
Don't we want someone who's enthusiastic to be in the event?
Yeah.
So I have no problem with it whatsoever. And you also have to understand, Rafael Devers having a great year, nursing a sore shoulder. You can't ask that guy to go there and take 50 to 75 swings and put more pressure. He's got a season to play. So the game also has to protect its stars, and the teams have to protect their stars. But on the same case, if we're promoting the game and Pete Alonso is a great way to promote the game, who cares? I think it's great. It's like having the NBA three-point shooting contest, and you've got a really good three-point shooter who's not an all-star. You'd like to see him in the three-point shooting. So I have no problem with it whatsoever. I commend Major League Baseball for stepping up and doing that.
Yeah, I'm happy that we got your take on that because Pete does relish in the
he loves it.
Derby.
He loves it.
And what he does too, let's say he's won twice. So if he wins again this year, he'll tie Ken Griffey Jr. as the most wins in a home run derby.
And he's generous with his winnings.
That's what I was about to bring up. He's donated percentages to Tunnel to Towers, for example, and other charities. And this year he wants to use, if he wins, portions of the winnings to help develop baseball fields for the kids. So I agree with you on all of that. But you know how media gets, and then people start speculating. It's like, did he deserve it? Does he not? But listen, he's the premier.
It's the All-Star game, John. It's the All-Star game. They make up rules for the All-Star game in different ways all the time.
Yeah.
I think it's great.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate that take on it, JP. That's why I wanted to get your take on it. I mean, because I knew you'd have insight on it. We'll have more of JP's hot takes following this from our sponsor of Hot Takes, Percy's Appliance Outlet.
Percy's Appliance Outlet, next to our showroom on Gold Star Boulevard in Worcester, featuring brand name appliances at up to 80% off regular retail price and come with manufacturer's warranties. Contractors and property managers save even more with volume discounts. Fast, professional delivery, removal, and installation, or bring your vehicle and pick it up the same day. Shop online with long-term financing available at Percy's.com. Percy's Appliance Outlet, first on Gold Star Boulevard in Worcester.
Okay, JP, one more hot take. Once again, All-Star game based. The selection process today has changed. I mean, the fans still get to vote the starters in, but I'd like to get your take on that inside process as an executive. How is there politicking that goes on between front offices and the commissioner's office? I just want to get an understanding of how some of these backup players are selected, and how much politics plays in that process of getting players selected to that All-Star game.
I don't think there's any politics at all. You're voted by your peers. The reserve players are voted by managers, coaches, and players. So
now, has that always been the case?
I don't think it's always been the case. I mean, to be honest with you, John, they've changed the rules so many times.
They have.
It's hard to keep up with them. But I think when the players can vote for their peers, that's the greatest compliment you can get. And it was nice this year. I got to watch a lot of guys being told they made the All-Star team, and it was nice to see, Otani, he's been there, done that, but to see like Jared Duran from the Red Sox become his first All-Star game, and you could see how excited Cora was to tell him and how excited he was, and to watch their teammates be so appreciative of him. So I think when you get voted by your peers, that's probably the greatest compliment you can get. And I would be in favor of doing that every year.
When you were GM for the Blue Jays, were you involved in that process, or that was a manager's thing to tell the guy he's made it or not?
No, it was. I always left that to the manager to tell him because, the manager has to deliver enough bad news, and so does the general manager. But let the manager be able to tell a few players some good things. And I thought that was important that he got to share that with the players.
Well, very good. I appreciate that. JP, now it's time for Batter Up with JP, brought to you by the Worcester Bravehearts. And if you're looking for affordable family fun, you've come to the right place. Check out the 4-time Futures Collegiate Baseball League champion Bravehearts. Free parking all season long, and you can get your all-you-can-eat ticket for just $20. And make sure you attend July 19th's game when the Bravehearts host Parkinson's Awareness Night. There'll be a jersey auction, post-game fireworks. You can follow the Bravehearts on Instagram at Woo Baseball. That's WOO Baseball. For information on all Bravehearts games and upcoming special promotions, go to WorcesterBraveheartsStore.com and get your tickets to a Bravehearts game today. On today's Batter Up with JP, we're honored to bring on a true baseball legend. He's covered the game since 1981. He's one of the top Major League Baseball analysts ever from ESPN's Baseball Tonight. He covers baseball on SportsCenter, a regular on the Baseball Tonight podcast. He's a senior writer for ESPN.com. He's a Baseball Hall of Famer with his 2022 induction receiving the Baseball Writers Association of America's Career Excellence Award. It's a pleasure to welcome Tim Kurkjain to the Brushback.
Well, thank you, John. Thank you, JP. It's really good to see you guys.
Tim, I was so excited to have you on the show because I do not know anybody who loves baseball more than you.
Well, thank you for that, JP. And just for you guys, I wore my Walter Johnson sweatshirt. It's a little cold in the house right now with the air conditioning. So I went to Walter Johnson High School in Bethesda, Maryland, named after the greatest pitcher of all time. And here I made a career out of baseball. I think there was some destiny involved that I went to a high school named after the Big Train, which is so cool. And get this, I just found this out recently. This is weird. Walter Johnson died on December 10th, 1946. And I was born on December 10th, 1956.
Wow.
So I had all of these connections to the greatest pitcher of all time. And I played baseball, basketball there, but I also worked for the school paper. It was called The Pitch. I did some work for the yearbook. It was called The Windup. So we had baseball connections all the way through my 3 years in high school, and I can't even begin to tell you how proud I am that I went to a school named after a baseball.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And that was going to be my opening question to you, Tim. You love the game so much. You respect the game so much. You are a torchbearer of our game in so many ways. When did you fall in love with baseball?
Well, JP, I grew up in a baseball house. My dad was a really good player, and he had a feel and a love for the game virtually unmatched of anyone I've ever met. So baseball was the primary language spoken in my house growing up. I have two brothers, Matt and Andy, who are in the Baseball Hall of Fame at Catholic University. They were great college players. This is all we did when we were kids. Even though we played basketball and football during those seasons, there was always a game on in our house. My dad used to show us how to make the double play out on the field, but occasionally when it was too cold to go out, he would throw a pillow down in the living room and he would show us the correct footwork using a pillow as second base. And then he would always throw the ball into the couch to make sure you got to throw it down here to make that guy get down, right? So one time he airmailed the couch and he threw the ball through the French door window. And he looked at me, his youngest son, and said, "Tim, tell Mom that you did it and I'll get you off easy." That's what happened in my house growing up. We spoke the language of baseball every single day.
And that's how I grew up. So that's why I'm laughing so hard. My dad was a minor league player in the Red Sox organization, and we did the same stuff. Oh, that's funny. So I know.
Right. And also, JP, my dad was a PhD in mathematics. He went to MIT undergrad. Wow. So my fascination with numbers comes from him. And I'm not a mathematician like him, not even
Yeah.
close. But I can't tell you how many times he and I, when I was a little kid, would sit around and look at the baseball encyclopedia. And he would point out things like, look, Joe DiMaggio hit 361 homers and struck out 369 times in his career. So things that I was learning from my father about the stats and the math of the game in 1966, I still remember it today. So I had a great upbringing from a dad who grew up in Watertown, Mass., loved the game, and also loved numbers. So put all that together, and that's how you end up with a dorky little baseball writer like me.
Well, I know you've spoken highly of your brothers. I know they were good players. I've heard you speak about them in the past. So that's a heck of a way to grow up around, guys who always want to play, guys who always want to talk about the game. But growing up, and I know you're from that Maryland area, I have a guess who your favorite player. I have two guesses who your favorite player was growing up, but I'm going to ask you who your favorite player was growing up.
Well, I think you're going to be wrong, JP, because I was a Washington Senators fan growing up.
I didn't know that.
Yes, they were terrible,
Yes,
they were my team. So we had two of them that stand out always: Eddie Brinkman, the flashy little shortstop for the Senators. I loved him. He was a terrible hitter, but he was a great shortstop. He was a terrible hitter until Ted Williams came along as the manager of the team, and his average went from like 220 to 280 in one season because Ted taught him how to hit. The other, of course, was Frank Howard, who hit majestic home runs in the mid-'60s. And I maintain, and I'm sure I'm wrong about this, he's still the strongest player that I've ever seen in my life. Stronger than Stanton, stronger than Judd, stronger than Bo Jackson. Yeah. He hit balls to places where no one has ever gone. And JP, he was doing that in the mid-'60s. He was doing that 60 years ago. That's how strong Frank Howard was.
And I remember Eddie Brickman told me one time he went to breakfast with Frank Howard, and Frank Howard ordered a dozen eggs. And then he had the dozen eggs, and the lady said, "You want bacon?" And he goes, "Yeah." So she gave him 2 strips of bacon. He says, "No, the whole slab." So he had the whole slab of bacon. So then he turns to Brinkman and says, "I'm still hungry." He says, "Do you have any pie?" The lady says, "Yeah, we have a blueberry pie." She brings him a piece. He goes, "No, the whole pie." And he ate the whole pie. But Frank Howard was legendary. They say he used to go work out, be sweating, hang his gear up, and just be sitting there in his jockstrap drinking beer. They don't make guys like that anymore.
No, they don't make guys like that anymore. And getting back to my brother Andy, I just heard this story like 2 months ago from my own brother when he was one of his friends, Eddie Baxter, his dad, John Baxter, was the equipment guy for the Senators. So my brother Andy was the ball boy multiple times at RFK Stadium for the Senators in the late 60s. And he told me that Ted Williams jumped in the cage one day. Ted Williams was like in his 50s and just hit rockets all over the place. And he hit a line drive that my brother, who was like 16 at the time, made a great leaping catch on. And Ted Williams said, "Hey, we need to sign that kid." I said, "Andy, how could you have never told me that story that you caught a line drive hit by Ted Williams? That's how I would introduce myself. Hi, I'm Tim Kurkjain. I caught a line drive hit by Ted Williams."
RFK Stadium, that was a piece of work with the Longines clock out there.
It was great. And JP, when the Nationals came back in 2006, I'll never forget this. No one had ever seen that stadium among the current players. So I'm standing there with Tom Glavine, and he's fascinated by the stadium because he's never been in it before. So he points to the outfield seats, and he goes, "What are those painted seats up there? What's that for?" And I said, "That's where Frank Howard hit home runs in the 60s. And he went, no, that's impossible. No one can hit a baseball up there. And I said, "I'm telling you, this is where he hit it." And Glavine looks at me and he goes, "There's no way the plate is where it is right now." I said, "Tom, this is the configuration of the field. It hasn't changed." That's when I knew how great Frank Howard was, is when a major league pitcher was just dazzled that anyone could hit a ball up there in a major league game.
So you grow up loving baseball. You grow up playing baseball. How did you start your career where you are today? Where did you start off?
Well, I started at the pitch at Walter Johnson High School, and I was an awful writer, JP. Good lesson for all young people who are trying to learn how to write. You can get better at it. You can become a better shortstop if you take a million ground balls every day. Well, I was such a bad writer at the pitch that one of my high school gym teachers came up to me once and said, "Tim, that might be the worst story I've ever read in the school paper." He said, I hope you're not planning on making this your life's work. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I can't be that bad. Well, that was the impetus for me to say, maybe I am that bad. I got to get better at this. So when I graduated from high school at 5'3" and 115 pounds and looking really good, I said, all right, I'm not playing college baseball. I'm not good enough. So that's when I decided, how am I going to stay in baseball? How am I going to make a career out of baseball? And that's when I said, well, I better learn how to write. So I just wrote and wrote and wrote and finally, eventually figured out how to do that. So that's how my career started. Too small to play, too small and not good enough to play after high school. And then I had to find something I could do, and writing was the avenue.
And where was your first job?
My first job was at the Montgomery Journal newspaper, tiny little local paper, but I also worked right out of college at the Washington Star, which was filled with star writers, including Dan Shaughnessy. He was our baseball writer. So I was there delivering coffee for the writers and taking race scores over the phone and going to Roy Rogers for dinner runs for everyone in the newsroom. But I learned so much watching the great writers work. I watched them report. I went to games with Dan Shaughnessy so he could show me how to do this. And I kept thinking, I'll never be able to do this. But the more you hang around it, it's like anything else, JP, when you see great people doing the job and you learn from that, that's the most important lesson I learned, is go watch the good ones and see how they do it and then try to figure it out yourself.
So let's jump ahead a little bit now. You've been in the game a long time. You've seen so much evolve in the game. What do you think about the state of our game today? What are your thoughts on it?
All right. The players are bigger, stronger, faster, and better than ever. I believe that with all my heart. However, I don't think the game is better than it was in the mid 80s when I was a young, upcoming writer who got to watch Cal Ripken and Alan Trammell and George Brett and Robin Yount and Paul Molitor play every day. Not only were they gifted, but they understood what they were doing better than any players I had ever met. I can't even begin to tell you how many times I talked to Cal Ripken about what he's thinking on this play. And that's what I don't think we do very well today. We overpower the game, our players do, with their immense physical gifts. But I'm just not sure they understand how to play the game like those guys did when I first started covering in the early 80s, mid 80s. So I think the game is great. The game will always be great, but it's a paradox. If the players are bigger, stronger, faster, and better than ever, then the game should be better than ever. But I don't think it is. I think we have too many strikeouts, too many walks, too many home runs, and too many guys thinking that I have to hit the ball out of the ballpark here. We have too many pitchers saying, I have to strike this guy out. I don't just have to get him out. I have to strike him out. I have to embarrass him, and I have to throw as hard as I can on every pitch. And those are the things that worry me about the game. Is we've kind of lost the let's put it in play. We've lost a pitcher saying, let's get 3 outs on 4 pitches on 3 weak grounders and let's go. We don't play that game anymore, and frankly, I miss it.
Why do you think it's evolved this way?
Well, it's the industry's fault, JP. They have told our hitters, look, the damage you're going to do is not a soft single to left field. It's getting the ball up in the air to the pull side and hitting a 3-run homer. So I don't even blame our players anymore. The sabermetric revolution has come in and said, why would you bunt when the next guy might hit a 3-run homer? Why would you give up an out? Why would you put a runner in motion when you might give up an out on the bases because the next guy might hit a home run? That's what I blame, is the industry got a hold of this and said, just like the 3-point shot in the NBA is, the more threes you shoot, the more points you're going to score and the more games you're going to win, which there's certainly some truth to it. But I miss the interior passing from Larry Bird in the NBA. I miss throwing it into the post and watching Kareem Abdul-Jabbar make a hook shot. We don't do that anymore. So baseball, what I miss is, the real smart pitcher going out there and saying, I just need to get the ball in play. My defense is going to take care of it. But that's not how it works. The industry has demanded of our pitchers, you throw as hard as you can on every pitch. You get a spin rate at an unbelievable level, and you get your strikeout rate to a point where that's where your value is. Nobody puts it in play against you. And that also, as we know, JP, leads to all sorts of injury issues when you got guys trying to throw 100 on every pitch and spin it with some violent movement.
You know what I find funny is, and I know you pay attention to the game like no one else, but I'm seeing what Cora is doing in Boston. And Cora is implementing the running game. He's doing a lot of the little things as a manager, and I think it's going to be counter to what is happening in baseball today. I think the team that goes back to hitting and running, the team that steals a few bases in the right spots, I think they're going to put themselves in such an advantage because we don't know how to hold runners on anymore. The first and third play at the major league level has become a little league play. The guy just goes to second base. There's never even a throw. The catchers don't throw as well anymore because of the one knee. We do not hold runners on at all. We can't, and obviously with the restriction of throwing over, that works in your favor too. So I think the team that eventually hits some runs, steals bases, even if it's a delay steal, and creates traffic on the bases in any way is going to have a bigger advantage because everybody else now has no idea how to defend these. And I've been doing a lot of AAA games. It's amazing no one can defend people running.
Right. And I'm with you on the Red Sox, and I'm with you on Alex Cora. JP, look at that offensive team. It is not that good, but because they're creative with their offense and how they work it, running here, not running there, whatever, that's how they do it. And the Guardians are doing the same thing, JP. They got Stephen Kwan at the top of the order, hadn't struck out 20 times this season, and he's hitting way over 300. And they put it in play, and they run the bases. This is not an accident that they're leading that division. Terry Francona instilled all this as the manager, and Stephen Vogt has done a brilliant job of picking it up. This is why those teams are successful, is they're playing a style of game that the others are not. And that's why they're so difficult to defend, because they're doing things differently.
And you mentioned Cleveland, but there was someone else I was thinking about with I was talking to my son, who's a scout for the Red Sox, and I said, "You're gonna think I'm old-fashioned here, but the Red Sox remind me of the '67 Red Sox. You've got Devers, who carries like Yastrzemski carried the team. You got Duran, who's basically Canigliaro, who was a good player till he got hit in the eye. But the rest of the team is a mix and match, just like the '67 team was. You know, they got Houck, who was their Lonborg, but Cora's done an amazing job of mixing and matching his lineup, his defensive replacements, working the bullpen, massaging the staff. I think the Red Sox are the best example of how to manage a team right now in baseball. And I would agree with you. Stephen Vogt's done a great job as well.
Right. 10 games over 500 for the Red Sox, and they just shouldn't be that good, but they are because of the manager. Makes you wonder, how could he be unsigned after this season? I do not understand. But JP, you said you're an old school guy, almost apologetically. No, that's what we need more of in the game, are people who saw the game played differently and understand that this worked in the 70s. We're using the same theories today. They're just under different names. And I just think we really, really need to get back to putting the ball in play. Our hitters are overmatched on a nightly basis. And it is time now for them to make an adjustment because the pitching is just too good. JP, The Mariners have struck out 10 or more times in 14 consecutive games as of today. No team in Major League history has ever done that. And the only other team that's come close is the Mariners last year, who struck out 10 or more times in 13 straight games. And I remind you, they're leading the division.
Right.
And they're striking out this many times. So I just think there's a better way to do it. But to make that adjustment is going to take a really long time.
Well, there's two things. I mean, coming from that side of the business, the baseball guy or the baseball lifer that has a lot to offer, he's been marginalized. And, current front offices don't want a lot of pushback. So they don't really want to be questioned on some of these things. And if someone brings up the fact that, hey, we can't be giving up 10 free outs a night. We got to find a way to get better at, two-strike approach and things like that. So I think it has to be a revolution where more people are accepting of hearing different opinions and not being afraid of the pushback. The other thing is, I've noticed there are so many marginal teams in baseball right now. There's a lot of easy wins out there. You look at the A's and the Angels and the White Sox and the Marlins. I mean, if you're in a slump and you go into one of those towns, I mean, you got a pretty good chance of coming out with 3 wins. And
the Rockies.
Right.
And this is not a healthy situation, JP, that I maintain the gap between the really good teams and the really bad teams is the biggest that I've ever seen in all the years that I've covered. And it's not a healthy situation that one team is that much better than the other. Now, the White Sox have been awful, and they still have a chance to go and beat a good team 2 out of 3 or even 3 out of 3. That's the ultimate beauty of the game, but it's way harder than it used to be. And it is not healthy for the industry that some of these teams are so bad and some of the other teams are so good.
And then you look at the middling teams. They're 3 games under 500, 4 games under 500, and they're still in the playoff picture. And it kind of makes you sit there and say, what are we rewarding? Are we rewarding mediocrity? I'm not a big fan of the extra playoff team. I don't know how you stand, but I think at some point, you should be valued for playing a strong 162.
I agree. The integrity of the regular season is critical. If you're going to play 162 and you're going to win your division, you deserve all the credit in the world for getting through a grueling season. And yet the way with our playoff structure, which I understand, I'm an old man now, but I'll take the 6 because it keeps more teams interested. But I don't think it's as healthy for the game as some others think, because this is the one game, JP, as the Diamondbacks proved last year. If you can get in with 84 wins and get hot, you can go to the World Series. This is the only sport where you can say that. When I used to love to watch the Bullets or the Wizards play basketball, when they would be the 9th playoff team and they would go into Chicago Stadium to play the Bulls, they had zero chance to win that series. Zero. Right. But you make the playoffs in baseball, you get a couple of hot pitchers going, and anything can happen, as it did last year when the Orioles and the Dodgers and the Braves were out like immediately.
So I'm going to switch gears on you here. Obviously, we've just lost Orlando Cepeda and Willie Mays. And I was having a discussion with somebody the other day. Willie Mays, to me, was a transformative player. I look at Willie Mays almost like I look at Michael Jordan. Willie Mays took baseball from an era of semi-athletic players to a guy who could do it all, who could run, throw, hit for power, who could absolutely dominate and change the game. And when I think of transforming players and how they've affected the game, and obviously with Willie's passing, I look back at Willie Mays as maybe, in my estimation, the greatest all-around player of all time. How do you see him and obviously recollect him?
Well, he's the second greatest player of all time for me, because Babe Ruth was, at least statistically, is the greatest hitter of all time, and he has as many career shutouts as Pedro Martinez. Think about that for a second. So the pitching hitting for Babe Ruth, to me, puts him number 1. But I understand that Babe Ruth didn't play against black players and Latino players. I understand all of that. But this is the point on Willie Mays. When he came to the big leagues in 1951, no one had ever seen anybody quite like him. his athletic build. No one had ever seen that kind of combination of power, speed, and defense. The game had never seen that. And I maintain that here it is, 73 years later, and he is still the greatest combination of power, speed, and defense to ever play the game. JP, he's the only player in history with a 300 average, 300 homers, and 10 gold gloves. And of course, he won 12 gold gloves, and it would have been 16 if they had the award when he was younger. And he had 660 homers. He completely changed the game. Just like you said, he made it a more athletic sport. And I don't think people who never saw Willie Mays truly appreciate what he did for the game. And they say, well, he wasn't that big. Yes, he was. Have you ever shaken his hand before?
Yeah.
Those are the biggest hands I've ever seen in my life. Yeah. So anyone who thinks he wasn't just because he was 5'10", 180, wasn't a big man. He was a huge man. All you had to do was stand next to him, and you knew that. So no matter what people tell you about Willie Mays as a player, I'm telling you, you multiply it by 10, and that's who he is. I'll never forget asking Johnny Bench, about Willie Mays. He goes, he was magical. He was perfect. And you talk about Michael Jordan. Reggie Jackson told me that Willie Mays was Jim Brown. He was Michael Jordan. He was Tiger Woods. He was Steph Curry shooting before the game. He was Baryshnikov. He was all of those wrapped into one player. And if I hear one more time that he wouldn't be a great player today, I'm really going to get upset. He would, if we dropped him in his prime into today's game and just gave him a little bit of time to understand how hard everyone's throwing, he would figure it out. And I firmly believe he would be the best player on the field today.
And you look at that generation of Aaron and Mays, and the game jumped for me when those guys became really good players. The game almost went from first gear to fifth gear, and just I think those guys revolutionized our game. And then you touched on the 80s. That was another group of players that built off that, and the athleticism took over. So I know you're a big Willie Mays fan, and I was too. And for us, you had an American League town in Washington. We had the Red Sox. We never saw the National League. So when the game of the week came on and they said the Giants are playing, we're like, wow, we get to see Willie Mays. This is unbelievable.
Yeah. And after the 71 season, so spring training of 72, the Pirates came to Washington to play an exhibition game right before the start of the 72 season. And I went to the game, and I saw Roberto Clemente play he was older then, but he was still in the prime of his career. And I went there with my brother and some friends, and I said, all I want to see are two things. I need to see him hit a rifle shot to right field, because nobody hit the ball harder to the opposite field than Roberto Clemente. And I said, and I need to see him throw from right field to third base. And JP, both of them happened in that game. And I went home thinking, all right, I just saw the great Roberto Clemente in person for the first time in my life, and it was breathtaking.
Yeah. Think about that generation. They were just the players that just totally changed the game. And if you look at today, in your estimation, which players would you pay to see?
Well, I would always pay to see Mike Trout play in his prime, which sadly has been taken away by injuries. Just another reminder how durable Hank Aaron was, how durable Willie Mays was. Those guys played every day. I mean, the guys I watch today, JP, are just unbelievably good. I did the Dodger game last night on TV. I'm still mesmerized by Shohei Ohtani, just how big he is. And I've been watching him for 7 years, and you can't take your eye off him on anything that he does. And one of the Dodgers told me this. I love this word he used for everything about Shohei. Everything he does is surgical. Like every swing he takes, there's a point and a reason behind it. every time he throws a baseball, every action he moves, whether he's lifting weights or running, it is a surgical approach. And that's one reason why he's one of the greatest players we've ever seen. So if you're asking me, who am I going to pay to see? I'm going to pay to see him. But I'm also going to pay to watch, Paul Skeens pitch. I mean, this is ridiculous what he's doing in his first 10 starts. And even though Ellie De La Cruz leads the major leagues in strikeouts and errors, that's a rare gift, by the way, to lead in both of those. Only 3 guys have ever done that at the end of a season in Major League history. It's hard to take your eyes off a guy who's 6'5", switch hits with power, and runs like that.
All-Star game's coming up. You still get excited about the All-Star game?
Absolutely. I've covered every one of them since 1981. And JP, let's face it, it's still an exhibition game, okay? It doesn't matter who wins the game. What matters is that Paul Skeens is going to face Gunnar Henderson, 2 22, 23-year-old guys in the bottom of the first inning in Texas. How can anything be better than that? And then maybe Soto and Judge come up against Paul Skeens. The All-Star game is all about confrontations. It's all about a celebration of the game, watching the very best players play against each other. And instead of, and I love basketball, but they literally create a lane so someone could go in and dunk it. But nobody's creating a lane for anyone in baseball. Paul Skeens is going to go out there and throw 100 miles an hour and see if Aaron Judge can hit it. That's why the All-Star game is still great for me.
I share your sentiment toward it because it reminds me of my childhood so much. I remember watching the All-Star game and knowing that I never saw Orlando Cepeda play if I didn't see the All-Star game. Willie McCovey, all those great National League players that you didn't get to see because they weren't on TV like they are today. I remember the game in Washington. Yastrzemski went over the fence and made the catch, and might have been a 1-0 game. They got rained the night before or something.
Right. It got rained out. And then the next day, McCovey hit 2 home runs in that All-Star game. Johnny Bench hit a home run. And my first All-Star game that I truly remember was 1965. And again, I was absolutely mesmerized at that point by Willie Mays, and I was only 8 years old. So we got a color television for the first time. And the first game we ever watched on color TV was the 65 All-Star game.
Where was it played?
And it was played in Minnesota. So Willie Mays is the leadoff hitter in the All-Star game in living color, and he hits a home run to start the All-Star game. And I went, oh my gosh, this is like the greatest thing I've ever seen. The greatest player I've ever seen with the absolute perfect baseball build in living color leads off the game with a home run. If I wasn't 100% hooked on baseball before then, I was after that.
Like, there are going to be people who are watching this show and they're going to say, he was excited on color TV?
Yeah. Yeah. And we didn't, it's so funny because my son Jeff is 30 years old now. So we had a conversation once about what life was like growing up. And I explained to him as we're clicking channels. And I said, Jeff, when I grew up, we only had 4 channels, 5 when we got channel 20 at our house. And I said, and we didn't have a clicker either. And he looked at me, smart kid, and said, how did you change the channel? I said, Jeff, we had to get off the couch, walk up to the TV, and turn the button. That's how you change the channel.
We used to have my sister Mary hold the rabbit ears and turn them so we could watch the Bruins game. So because it was
everybody had a coat hanger on the top of their television to get perfect reception. My gosh, how things have changed.
So Tim, who do you like this year? Which team stand out for you?
Well, it's impossible. We've talked about the Guardians, so I'll leave them alone. I love the way the Orioles play the game. And since I live in Maryland, I see more of their games. And I'm just dazzled by Gunnar Henderson, who we mentioned earlier. So the other day, JP, you'll appreciate this. The Diamondbacks were in town, and I did that game on the radio. And Louis Gonzalez of the Diamondbacks broadcast team was there to broadcast the game. So Gunnar Henderson walks by. Jim Palmer pulls him over and says, Gunnar, meet Luis Gonzalez, who, remember, hit 57 home runs in one season. Was a pretty damn good hitter for a long time. So Gunnar meets Luis Gonzalez, walks away, and Luis looks at me and goes, I can't believe how big he is. I can't believe it. And he goes, he's got some of the biggest hands I've ever seen. Cal Ripken told me that the other day. He goes, people don't understand how big and strong and fast Gunnar Henderson is. So, yes, being close to the Orioles here, it's really been fun to watch these young players on the way up. And again, there's so many interesting teams out there. I just did the Phillies game the other night, and I love watching them play. And I love being in their clubhouse because I'm telling you, JP, there is a college baseball feeling when you walk in that clubhouse. You get it from Schwarber, you get it from Bryce Harper, you get it from a lot of guys, Alec Boehm. The chemistry and camaraderie, I don't care how corny it sounds, really exists in that clubhouse. And then they take a really talented team out to the field, so there's no surprise they're the first team to get to 60 wins, and they're 60-30, and they're not slowing down.
I don't know of a better fit, and I don't even know if Bryce Harper even knew it. That guy fits in Philadelphia. It's like it was a marriage made in heaven. The fans take to him. He's taken to that city, and when you go into Citizens Bank Park, it's like a college atmosphere. The place is jumping. There's such a camaraderie with that team in that city. It's really fun to see.
It really is. And again, I did their game in England, in London, and the way those Philly fans traveled, I was astonished. Although the year before I did the Cubs and the Cardinals in England, and boy, did those teams travel well because there were fans everywhere. But there were Philly fans everywhere. So Rob Thompson, manager of the Phillies, told me that a couple of his coaches were going out to a Phillies bar in London. Who knew there was a Phillies bar? Well, there are three of them. So Rob says, well, if the two coaches are going, we're all going. So the entire coaching staff of the Philadelphia Phillies rolled into this, I think it's called Passaic Avenue. I don't even know how to pronounce it. And that's the name of the bar. These guys roll in, and Rob looked at me and he goes, the place went ballistic when we walked in. So I said, well, you only stayed for 15 minutes, right? And he goes, no, we stayed for 2 hours. We had a great time.
That's Canadian, so he could close a bar.
Of course, I just loved it that the Phillies went into this bar, 6,000 miles from home, and stayed and celebrated with those fans, because those fans show up 44,000 strong, and that explains the love affair right now with the Phillies in Philadelphia.
See any trades coming up you think may happen?
Yeah, and you're a GM, JP, and I get so confused this time of year. There's so much misinformation out there. There's so many things that I think might happen, and then they don't. But you know better than any. We've got, as you said, we've got the A's and the Angels. We got the Rockies, the Marlins, and the White Sox. And then every other team still thinks they have a chance to win. So I'm confused as to what the trade deadline is going to look like with so fewer sellers than normal. But first, obviously, you have to look at the White Sox. I mean, they're in a complete rebuild, or they should be. And Garrett Crochet could really help all the teams that need a starting pitcher. But, you're a GM. I mean, do you spend a fortune for a guy who was a relief pitcher? Now he's a starting pitcher, and he's great with great stuff and a great kid. But how many innings does he have left in that arm this year? What's he going to be like down the stretch? What's he going to be like in October? These are huge questions that have to be answered. So I think all lights have to shine on the White Sox to see what they do with Crochet, with Luis Robert. I'm not sure what's going to happen. It could be a dud, but every time I think the trade deadline is going to be a dud, like 6 huge players turn, and I go, why didn't I see that?
Well, Toronto's sitting on a couple of good players. That's going to be an interesting one.
Right. And who knows where they're going to be? Ross Atkins has come out and said, we're not trading Bichette, we're not trading Guerrero. But what if they fall off the earth the next 3 weeks? And what if the logical thing to do is to trade one or both of them? JP, I've been told this a million times, I'm sure from you. This is where GMs earn all their money right now. Are we in or are we out? Are we going to take a risk and give up 2 prospects to get a rental player? Or are we going to sit back? It's a fascinating time, and as much excitement as there is, I wouldn't want to be a GM at this time, because if you make a terrible trade, you could set back your organization for years.
And yourself.
Well, of course, you're out the door if you screw up the trade.
So I'm going to let you go, Tim, because I know you probably got like 6 radio shows and other things coming up. I can't thank you enough for doing this. But before I let you go, when you and I were doing baseball tonight one night, I made a comment, leave the glove, take the cannolis. And Steve Berthium said he was laughing his head off and you had no reaction. And Steve said, Tim, have you ever seen The Godfather? And you told me you've never seen The Godfather. So 14 years later, Tim, tell me you've seen The Godfather.
All right, look, it was a real black hole in my career that it took me about... Yes, I've seen The Godfather now, finally. And it was great. It was so intense. The scene where Al Pacino shoots the cop in the neck. I couldn't even get through it. It was so intense. Look, I love movies, but I just never got around to it. And then enough people said, you are an idiot. Do you not understand what great filmmaking is all about? So yes, I've seen The Godfather multiple times. I'm embarrassed it took me that long, but now I've seen it, so I can cross that off the list now. Okay. And that was bad. And for an Italian guy like you, I'm sorry that I screwed that up.
No, that's probably the only thing you ever screwed up. Tim, you're the best. I have so much respect for you. I appreciate your friendship. I appreciate you coming on. God bless you and your family, and let's stay in touch.
My pleasure, and thanks for making this fun, JP. It's baseball.
It's supposed to be fun.
We're supposed to enjoy doing this. Yeah. All right, I'll see you soon.
All right, take care. Thanks, Tim.
JP, a true legend in the game. Great guest. Thanks for bringing Tim on.
Yeah, classy guy, loves the game, and entertaining. I could talk to Tim all day. He just loves the game so much.
Well, that's very evident, and he's classy. He's a legend. JP, that's going to wrap it up for this week's Brushback. I'm sure you're going to be watching the All-Star game like everybody will be. So any predictions before we wrap it up here for the All-Star game?
I've always been at heart an American League fan. I just can't get it out of me, even though I've worked for the Giants and the Mets. I've just at heart been an American League fan.
Well, there you go. I'm going to go for the other side for the National League because of my
your Mets roots. I got it, John. I appreciate the loyalty.
Yes, always loyal to the National League as well. All right, that'll wrap it up until next week when we return. This is John Arezzi for JP. Enjoy the All-Star game, everyone.